Hi, and welcome everybody. I'm Dustin Jez, new face to start our 18th morning, I believe, in terms of the staff chat rooms. We've had an awesome experience connecting with partners, connecting with our staff members, giving people an opportunity to really share their passions and ways that you can connect to resources, but really with each other to share this moment. It's definitely a moment where we feel the learning is rapid. It's transforming the way we do work together. It's transforming the way we connect with others, and the growth is extreme. Today, we're lucky to have Titus as the host that will lead us through one of the partnerships we're really proud to have gained and earned over the years. And yesterday, just reflecting back on the journey and how the partnership with Hacking STEM, and for those of you that aren't familiar with Hacking STEM, a group within Microsoft that was incubated and supported and really tasked with the challenge of bringing relevant STEM resources to the education system. So like Bill Gates' mindset around democratizing computers and offering a personal computer in every home, the core and mission around the group that was dealing or tasked, incubated around STEM was how do we democratize and offer opportunities globally for learning to happen with or without technology? How do we do this around a future skills modeling focused on design thinking and a lot of the core engineering concepts? So in starting with that, I'm just going to share a bit of our journey. Hopefully I can bring it up. I'll try to share my screen to maybe my what would your name be, Martha? The permanent host? Let me just see here. I'll share my desktop and then I'll open up my PowerPoint. And then I'll check in if Michelle, since you're across the pond, I'm thinking if you can see my slide deck, then I'd say we're good to go.
You're good to go.
Awesome. So when we think about our journey and the Hacking STEM team at Microsoft, we got to know the team before they were called Hacking STEM. So we went, and it was our first time going forward through this experience. I'm not going to do my subtitles for this time. And Martha and I, in our mission to continually learn, and if I reflect back on 2016, the organization had done some pretty amazing things with Microsoft and their partners. We were having great impact and outcomes that we believed in, and really started to connect with the core mission and the drivers that Microsoft Education was experiencing in their rethinking and approach to how they would engage in educators and school systems. This picture in the background was the Microsoft booth and their STEM resources. And at the time, there was a lot of focus on robotics and physical devices that would be like the Spheros and the Makey-Makeys. I'm not sure if microbit had hit the scene yet, but there was a lot of physical computing and robotics going on and some maker kits. And then we came to this space and it was just exploding in one area, not around OneNote necessarily, like not around Minecraft, which had just launched, but this STEM experience. And to the right here, I'll try to zoom in, Karen Weber is right in the middle, and she's the girl here with the blonde hair and really the leader behind envisioning what was here. And what we were drawn to immediately was how she was engaging with individuals that had never really experienced STEM learning before. So what she did is approached the experience from a professional development standpoint, from what we like to think about in our production model at Fair Chance Learning, really that entry point or ground zero of someone that's never experienced technology or never experienced STEM opportunities before. And what you can see here in this first table, and she had 3 tables set up that would be a kind of phased approach to lead someone to really get after what I'll show as a smart city. And the beginning piece was simply building crafts and getting hands-on, connecting with your creativity and the art behind digital making. And what was beautiful or amazing about this piece was the invitation to learn and the invitation to connect. And you can see people here, which you don't tend to see at conferences, sitting down and engaging and actually completing a task. After that, their instructors, and you can see them in yellow shirts here, would guide them to a next space that really was numbered and was modeled for where could you take something like arts and crafts if we were going to combine a digital moment. And they offered these experiences already built. So what you would see is if you shook the table, you would see how on the screen boats would move in the water. You would see a reaction digitally so that visually you could capture what was happening with these physical things on the desk. Lastly, and it's hard to tell from here, is that they had this smart city where people could actually start building anemometers. They could start building, and I won't remember all the names. I was intimidated definitely to start, but the different sensors that would measure earthquakes, that would measure wind speed, that would measure distance traveled. And as you shake the table, the numbers and information would be reflected in Excel. And the excitement around this was unbelievable. And on the side here, just to get a sense of the core, around hacking STEM is, if we look at the end, engaging activities that integrated computational thinking and design thinking. And today, as Titus is going to share an inquiry-based set projects, it's really something that connected immediately when he joined the team. Well, from ISTE, Microsoft Education invited Fair Chance Learning to what's called Hack the Classroom. Brian and I at the time got down, and that's Jordan Shapiro, an education editor, and Karen, and here we were on screen. We had like a makeup studio before. It was crazy. And we got on, and there was 13 educators that connected and learned in this segment around here, these wind turbines, where we, in one instance, would hold up a hair blower, and these things would spin, and you would see how fast the revolutions were happening in Excel. And then the second one was set up so that when you clicked on a Bing map, you could go within 24 hours to different locations in the world, and that anemometer would reflect the wind speed in South Africa, or it would reflect the wind speed in famous surfing sites that we'd visit. From that, we knew there was this opportunity, and we had some incredible educators, but it wasn't until Titus came on board with his background and really thinking programmatically on how do we contextualize this for Canada, and how do we start to integrate this effectively in our programming. On our website, the girl at the bottom here, this was an event led by Titus where we had university students, we had high school students, and Hacking STEM had been invited to participate at the Ontario Science Centre, and 17,000 students came through that booth building fingers, doing roller coaster races with Lego pieces, and all seeing the data and analytics on the board and some of the design thinking that goes into it. And kind of Titus dipped his toe there pretty extremely. And then from there, on the right, we can see student events where design thinking and engineering is been brought in for starter activities, and any of you that have been involved in the Transform Ed experiences, some of those Lemon activities. And then at the top here, we see a bunch of educators, and what I'd like to draw at this moment here is that it's not very often we talk about sharing being that shiny button you should find to share and elevate the conversation, share your learning, connect with others. This here is not a task that's driven by mobile technology. This is a wow factor where you have a group of women looking at the responses of a tennis ball hitting a recreated brain to see the experience in Excel. And these adults are just, they're so excited, and you can see every single one. It's not often where you see every single one trying to capture the moment. And that's where we've gotten to under this programming led by Titus. So with that, Titus, where we are today, if you can give people an update, I think it's relevant around kind of some of those insertion points that possibly Hacking STEM and or Fair Chance Learning can help that distance or remote support. But just wanted to start the conversation by sharing that it's been a 4-year journey with a wicked team, and given the opportunity to work with some of the leadership within Fair Chance Learning, where a program like this can be taken, and how it can really deliver exciting outcomes for Canadian educators. So I'll try my best here to share my screen. Back to you, Titus.
Let me just see. I'll see if I can share mine. There we go.
Look at you two, just sharing the love.
Oh, amazing. So yeah, Dustin, thanks so much. You really do see the passion that we have at Fair Chance for this program that Microsoft has, the Hacking STEM program. But I think also, as I'm going to try to demonstrate this morning, the sort of the foundation or the heart of what Hacking STEM and ultimately Microsoft and therefore, not just therefore, but also Fair Chance Learning are passionate about. And that's, as you've put, Dustin, looking at inquiry-driven learning, we might call 21st century skills, global competencies, pick whatever theme you want to use for the day, but ultimately, how are we putting students and their learning and their method of learning first, and not being as prescriptive in terms of what is how the learning should look and what even the outcomes are. That's really the heart of Hacking STEM. But I'm going to go back a minute, if I could, before I could answer some of your questions, Dustin, around what are the opportunities, and sort of set the stage for the why. And this is a why that we have at Fair Chance, and we see echoed, like I said, at Microsoft and Hacking STEM. This idea of learning technical skills is actually not that new, really, when we sort of put it into the context of our educational system. It's something that we've prioritized for years. I think back to the mid 20th century, we had the space race and other sort of pressures on society to be building our technical skills. We may have at one point measured our ability by how many words per minute are you able to type. And that was a very clear distinction. It was a progression from the analog into a digital world, and it was a measure that we could use and we could share between individuals to see how their skills were progressing. But as the 21st century continues, and as we are innovating and new technologies are emerging constantly, it becomes less important that we develop these very specific technical skills. And how many words per minute can you type, or how is your what coding languages do you know? But more so that we are needing to view technical skills as a mindset as opposed to a particular set of skills. A mindset that will prepare our students for the jobs that we haven't even invented yet, for the technologies that are going to emerge. And at the heart of that mindset then becomes a shift from just learning in what we would have called the 3 R's, the 19th and 20th centuries, into a inquiry-driven model, a learning by doing that, as we outlined here, really brings in design thinking, engineering loops, computational thinking, sometimes we might capture under the 6 C's. And technical skills are a part of that, as are more soft skills, as are more of the traditional, say, liberal arts or the social sciences and the like. We don't have a separation between the technical and the humanities. They are all rolled together into these 6 C's. And the important thing for the reason for really looking at it holistically is that if we were just to say, okay, STEM jobs, the reality is that they aren't just technical jobs. They are a broad application of thinking, and a broad application of STEM and technical. And not only are the pure STEM jobs more comprehensive, non-STEM jobs do also require, what we call STEM thinking as well too. So you can't really separate the two of them. They're so intertwined.
Titus,
yeah,
when we think about that STEM thinking, because it's not a concept we hear a lot. Like we hear design thinking, we hear some different different labels. When you think of STEM thinking and some of the maybe times you've witnessed that either at an educator level or from a student experience, what would be maybe an example of when we get a student or an educator in that moment?
Yeah, and I think that's a good thing to call out, Dustin, because yeah, we can throw out a bunch of terms, STEM thinking, design thinking, and the like, but ultimately I'd rather see us, and I'm guilty of this as well, replacing them with sort of future ready thinking or inquiry or open-minded, to just be blunt about it, because that's ultimately what when we enter into a STEM thinking mindset, we enter into a maker mindset or a future ready, we're, as educators and therefore as learners and as a system, preparing ourselves to go where the passions lead and where the creativity will take things. And so it flips it from having STEM thinking and future ready thinking, says I'm not really concerned about the outcome, I'm more concerned about the journey to get there. And that ultimately is, you've seen in design thinking when people talk about some of the amazing innovations that have come out of that school of thought with again, STEM thinking and any sort of design loop. You can't. It's not a clear path. It's meandering and it will take in all sorts of directions. So it's a mindset as opposed to a process.
Cool. Yeah, no, that totally connects. I think for those of you joining the call and maybe some of our team members, I don't know if you know this or not, but Titus did lead a makerspace in a community, and I think some of that maker background, Titus, in terms of your approach from a professional standpoint and now coming back into education, not that you left, but I think education becoming now at the forefront of that. How does some of that maker mindset contribute to this future skills conversation?
Yeah, so there's all sorts of different ways of defining or engaging in a maker mindset. One of the defining pieces of it, though, is really community-led and collaborative and open. And the maker movement has thrived when people have been given space to explore, when the collaboration is encouraged, when tangents and crazy ideas are given space to flourish as well too. And we saw that in community spaces. We've seen it in be it small projects that have benefited a handful of people through to large scale transformations in things like maker fairs and people transforming their communities, and then that mindset also bringing itself into the public realm and governments transforming the way that they build services for citizens under that sort of maker mentality and approach. And in the last 5 to 7 years, that maker mindset has found its way more intentionally into education and more maybe comprehensively. And you see classrooms that are flipping the education away from educator-led to more student-educator discovery. That whole model of less us, more them, applying more of a problem-based learning, constructivist thinking that brings a let's build, let's create, let's discover, and through that discovery we'll learn. So the learning by doing, the inquiry-driven learning piece is the outcome of that thinking. I'm going to quickly just sort of skim through a few of these because I want to kind of bring up this slide here, this idea of what does inquiry-based learning mean, and a couple here that I wanted to point out that's related, also part of the maker movement as well, and sort of future-ready thinking. This one right here, this idea of developing frustration resistance, I love. It's this idea that when we enable an inquiry learning model, that students and also most importantly educators, and then ultimately systems will get frustrated, will get annoyed, and the temptation is to throw up your hands and to say, well, this doesn't work. This obviously isn't a model that we can use, or this isn't a skill, this isn't a task I can achieve. But that is ultimately demonstrating that inquiry-based learning is working, because when you get frustrated and when you work through that frustration, you end up developing the resistance to that as a muscle in the same way that you do when you work out. And as you develop more frustration resistance, you're able to tackle harder and harder problems. You are able to become resilient in ways that you wouldn't be if you obviously gave up so quickly. But more importantly, inquiry-based learning and working through some of these core skills is what develops the range that ultimately students and educators and systems need in order to respond to a constantly changing and developing reality that is, the 21st century and beyond. There's, some really great research and thinking now that we've, in the past, focused too much on specialization. And you see that in education, where students are encouraged to find something that they're good at and to hone in on that. And that's important, right? Obviously, developing specific skills, but we also have realized that those who have range, that individuals who are able to move between subject areas, that can do deep dives when they're passionate, but then come up and explore other pathways, they are able to see connections between those spaces for students. I mean, seeing connection between subjects, seeing how science and liberal arts and humanities fit together gives you a more comprehensive understanding of the world, and therefore seeing opportunities to step into new innovations, new creativity, solutions to prior problems. So inquiry-based learning is the method by which we see range developed. Range is important in order that we can respond to what we might call an uncertain future. And hacking STEM, to get back to the point here, is an inquiry-based learning approach to activities. The ambition of the project is very similar, as Dustin's shared as well too, to the Microsoft mission. This idea of modernizing STEM education to enable every student on the planet to achieve more. Modernizing, meaning it's bringing in what I've just sort of outlined there with these inquiry-based learning, 21st century skills, and every student. And this is the greatest thing about hacking STEM. You may have picked it up from what Dustin shared and what you'll see in a second. Very low cost. Everyday objects that you find around your house, around your school, they have easy access to. And then if you need anything specialized, it's used in a repeatable, scalable way. So you don't end up with anything so obscure or proprietary that it has no other use for you in your practice. Hacking STEM lessons are interdisciplinary, as you can imagine, right? They're designed to be cross-curricular, to be accessible up and down the grade levels as well. We've worked with these lessons as young as kindergartners, building these robotic hands with, how many did we have? Felt like
that was an ambitious day.
It was.
Well, in Wellington Catholic, I think it was 125 kindergarten students.
Yeah.
That went through a STEM experience, and one of them building a finger, and yeah, pretty awesome in terms of the flow of that day.
Yeah, and interestingly about that too is that, to go back to sort of the background, students weren't saw no reason why they couldn't achieve this. They walked into my session and like, oh, cool, we're going to do a craft. We're going to build something. I know this. I know how to use tape and scissors. It was the parents and in some cases the educators who were like, oh, I don't know if they'll be able to do this. They were the ones who kind of got their backs up and were a bit concerned about the abilities. And at the end of the day, the students can, and they, when given space to explore, they end up achieving way more than you give them potential for.
And just to give everyone context, how long were those sessions? Because I think we had to modify a little bit in terms of the time. So how long were the sessions?
Yeah. So I had about 15 minutes with each group of students. Typically, we would do a hacking STEM. If I'm condensing it down, kind of like an hour and a half, ideally it's like a multi-day workshop series. So we strung it down to about 15 minutes of material. And if you've ever done a craft with kids, 15 minutes isn't enough.
Right. But I would say you were able, much like the ISTE experience we began the conversation, thinking about the environment so that the learning momentum would be there. There was levels of frustration, but there wasn't a give up moment. And I would say students had the opportunity to build and create what they were doing and then demonstrate what that finger and the motions would look like digitally by connecting to Excel, which was, that was fun.
And that's the neat thing about this, Dustin. Like you see my slides here. We have this physical, we build objects. Dustin shared, built those wind sensors, the anemometers. We build robotic fingers. I'll show you a few other examples here. But then we connect that physical into the digital. So using a microcontroller like a microbit or an Arduino and a free plugin that's available for Excel, we connect the device that's been built and then visualize the data. So on this slide, you'll see this is the way we can visualize data around finger movement. So we build a sensor for a finger, you attach it, you bend your fingers, and you see the amount of flexion that your finger has. And that's great to show how data science is built around real world, and that it's collecting data and then using that data to inform design decisions. In this case, maybe can we better create robots so that they more emulate the human movements and motions, but also using that data to understand the world around us. So we got this example here of wind speeds. Being able to create an awareness of what does the 60 miles an hour or 100 miles an hour actually look like. So not just seeing a number on a screen, but seeing that physically as well. And moving seamlessly between those two worlds is important for our future skills. So if you're interested, if you are wanting to bring these into either your classroom, your home, I guess at this point, they're all available for free online, full packages as lesson plans, as material lists, as those Excel spreadsheets as well, and they're constantly being updated. And not only are they being updated by the Hacking STEM team and by partners like us, they're being improved and expanded on by educators like you and I and others around the world. Hacking is about not letting something end. Hacking is about continuing to evolve, to iterate, solving, finding clever solutions to tough problems is really what the term hacking means. And so hacking STEM is really about not letting STEM education remain stagnant and just about learning the way things are as we understand them now, but thinking about how can we learn STEM in an evolving future, and how can we constantly improve that. So the reason I belabor that point is educators are contributing every time we run a session. So here we've got this lemon battery activity that we do to kickstart a lot of our sessions. We learn new things about how that activity can be done by getting feedback from educators. This one here is around using lemons to light up an LED bulb. We give no instruction, and we see how educators, how students across all levels start to tackle that problem. Gets them thinking outside the box of, well, I'm going to just follow the instructions. The sensor finger here, as I've shared as well too, it's constantly being tweaked and evolved. But this is probably the best example of why hacking STEM is big on hacking. This is the brain impact simulator lesson plan. It's one of the more recent ones, but it came from educators who took part in the 2018 Microsoft Hackathon. They saw what you could do with hacking STEM, and then took their curriculum, took their lesson plans, and brought them together and developed this new activity. And now this activity is a part of the library on hacking STEM. So there's an invitation to be contributing to those lessons. And then we've taken this lesson, and we now have incorporated it into our programs. As Dustin shared that picture with the teachers all taking a photo of it, it's possibly one of the most socially inspiring activities that I've done. That is, people get this amazing wow moment when they build a sensorized hat, they hook it up to the testing rig, and then we model the data. It's around measuring what happens when you get a head impact, and what exactly goes on the various lobes of your brain. How does the brain move inside the skull? Inside the skull, and what that means for your behaviors or your cognition or other things. One of the reasons that this is so people love this is that everyone can relate to it. It's a very understandable challenge that we experience. We look at the concussion rates across sports. People automatically assume football and hockey and high contact sports have high concussion rates. But if you look at the data, and we show that, you see that playground sports and dancing and other things, people experience concussions there. And when we do these workshops, you usually hear about an educator or two who either has a concussion, has students in their class, has someone close to them who's experienced this. And it makes that idea of concussions and a brain impact so much more understandable. And the nice thing about it as well is that there's very clear extension activities on it. We can show what the brain looks like if it's unprotected, and then working with your students, you can give them a design challenge, and they can build a helmet. They can build some sort of protection or mitigating device, and then run the test again and show how helmets can help to prevent serious brain injury as well. And they'll start to bring that social side into it as well. And why is it important that we wear protective gear when we're playing or engaging in sports?
So as we get ready to get after our Friday and the weekend, Titus, and we consider, I know that there's a lot of educators out there, a lot of students, and a lot of parents looking for opportunities to learn, especially around project-based learning opportunities, things that are going to motivate and excite them. And we've seen the excitement, but if we had to think about, we know from all the work we do with Microsoft that there's free access to Excel. And just to confirm, we can get these workbooks and brought into Excel for free?
Yeah, so I don't have my Excel open here, but yeah, as part of the Excel license that you'll have available, there's an add-in, and you're right, Dustin, thanks for bringing this up. They built a data streamer add-in, and it's a free little add-in that you can put onto Excel, and what it lets you do is bring in live data into Excel. Excel is a really powerful tool. We're really used to using it with large data sets, but traditionally static data. So it's great for building a budget, maybe making some charts, and having some fun that way. But this add-in lets you bring in data in real time and then visualize it again in real time. So we can hook up the microbit into Excel. The microbit collects the data and then Excel will do all of its amazing visualizations that it has built in. So you can do a chart in real time, which is what's happening with the brain impact simulator. So when the ball hits the head, we visualize through charts and other graphics what happens. No cost, all free, all built in right out of the app.
So as we share with the audiences here, we have access to the materials through Excel. So a lot of us, we talk about that light switch or that technology that's really pervasive across any device. Excel would be one of those tools. You have these amazing resources that are built in partnership, and I can see the screen here with companies like NASA and Lego, and even the core team at Microsoft, the educators that they bring in. We know they've flown in educators from countries that can afford to bring educators to do design thinking challenges over a 2-week period to come up with things like the brain simulator. If you had to just offer some advice, because you've done such a great job with our organization building out these experiences for varieties of groups, could you give like a top 3, like just how would I get started to think about the materials, the technology, and maybe offering this opportunity in my learning space or teaching space?
Yeah, so I think if you're looking for an easy lift to get started, the lemon battery that I showed is a great one, because it brings in a lot of the theory and with everyday objects as well too. But there's a number of others. So if you go to aka.ms/hackingstem, you'll see that there are lessons that don't even require the data streamer and Excel, that get your students working in this inquiry-based learning model, STEM thinking, 21st century thinking. There's others that just use Excel. So I start there, I guess, is the first one. There's some lessons that are all there's no digital component to them. So looking at how fast humans run and comparing the speed of humans to other land animals, and then graphing that on Excel and showing how our speed compared to a cheetah or other land animals. So start there, aka.ms/hackingstem. Then the other piece would be, if you really want to get started on this, is think about small lifts that you can bring in that flip the classroom from your, like, this is the activity we're going to do, to how could we explore this open world of STEM thinking. I think, Dustin, recreating that booth that Karen did at ISTE in 2016, where you've got these stations set up and encouraging students to move through them, scaffolding through something that they're familiar with towards something that is new to them, like building a smart city. Everyday objects. Cardboard making is so accessible, especially now when we're sort of stuck at home and we're getting so many packages in the mail. If don't break those down, use those to build and to explore. And then your students, or you as an educator, can bring in technology into that as well.
That's awesome. I would say so. That's an amazing starting point. I know. For you all here, some of us joining us, we're on a pathway to offer professional development in a variety of ways for everyone, and one of those pathways is going to be directly to connect with our team to help support you in this remote learning journey. So as we map out the video shorts that we're going to offer on demand, the webinar series that likely will be up and going next week, and then this concept about inviting every one of our team members the opportunity to be booked. We'll have a calendar of events open. I think, and I don't know if you're up for this, we haven't talked about this, Titus, but I think the opportunity to support that hacker mindset, the maker culture, thinking about how do I invite STEM in real ways that is equitable, accessible, inclusive, and starts from the core principle of not about what's the fancy thing that I can socialize at the end, but what's the learning that I can do that's going to build the resiliency, build some of those concepts around, you spoke about the frustration, right? And learning that skill, or feeling the frustration resistance being a crucial skill. So if you're up for it, I'm going to start thinking about encouraging people to connect with you to lead some of these conversations. For those of you joining us today, does anybody have questions for Titus? We're going to come towards the end of this in terms of the content that was shared, but is there any questions that anyone would have around STEM, Maker, hacking STEM, fair chance learning, and supporting you in this remote learning journey?
They're all too busy looking at the lessons now.
That's totally, and if you want to use your microphone or use the chat, that's totally your call. But I'll pause for a couple seconds here and just see if there is any questions.
My apologies, I had to jump out and answer another call and I'm back, so my apologies if you've already addressed this. But my question is, when presenting Maker activities at home to your students in a remote learning environment, do you give them a choice sort of scenario, or do you say, okay, see if you can gather up these sorts of materials and attempt this task?
It's a great question, and I'm just really starting some of my thinking around what does Maker and inquiry-based learning look like, remotely. But I think we could bring in some of the very similar practices, and rather than having a build list of, okay, well, you got to find these objects, and then students who are unable to access them or have different thoughts feel unable to participate. Focus more on the thinking mode that the type of inquiry that is desired. So say for instance, if we want to do a Maker project, we got this challenge. There's a squirrel that's eating the seeds out of the garden. Can we create a safe way to capture that squirrel and relocate them? Leaving it open enough for that, or building things like ways of measuring the amount of sunlight that comes into your house, and just leaving it open like that, and letting students determine what materials, what measurements, anything else, like keeping it so baseline, so that the creativity is what comes forward, and not did they achieve this these steps.
Now, as part of that, it's a great answer. And Melissa, if you have a follow-up question, please jump in. But I was going to ask about the collaborative opportunity and kind of the collaborative nature of some of these projects that we've experienced.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to see what that might look like in a remote scenario as well. So
with making, as I think I shared, it's collaboration is a central tenet to that sort of movement. And remote learning is also about collaboration, just in a different way and with different tools. We can create, I want to say, balanced collaboration opportunities in making through remote. So giving students and learners an opportunity to share what their progress looks like, to document. So one of the other things that comes out as a bonus to making and collaboration is developing strong documentation skills, which for anybody who's ever worked in a shared project, understanding the thinking that the other person was going through their documentation is so helpful. So that's a great future ready skill. So collaboration through one-way documentation, through two-way, I got the project this far, can you help me take it to the next level? And making doesn't just need to be, building something with physical objects. Making can be what goes on in a Minecraft world, and, collaborating on a collaborative build. It can be, working together in a, shared doc or a shared spreadsheet. Making is the approach to working on problems, not the outcome of what you created.
Thanks, Titus. And as we come towards the end of this session, I'll pause again for another 20 or 30 seconds just to see if there's any more questions from the audience, either in the text or in the chat or in the or coming off.
Mm-hmm.
Julianne, are you there?
Yes,
How are you doing?
I'm good.
Thanks for joining us this morning. For those of you that might not know, Julian and I went to school together when we were doing our teachers college, and now you work within special education. Is that right?
I do. I'm
had
an
to
assistive technology teacher.
Amazing. If you had to think about ways that this might connect with some of the programming you're doing, what's your initial just perceptions of what some of this hacking STEM or maker mindset opportunities? Because we know today when we think about this remote learning scenario, we are hearing loud and clear as an organization that supports inclusion and accessibility, that access and equity right now is really still trying to find its way to be meaningful for students, and some of those students are just not able to be at their best right now. Given those circumstances. Right. So I don't know if you want to comment a little bit or if you have any questions for Titus.
Some of the teachers that I'm supporting, I'm finding that using things at home, because they don't all have the access to tech, has been a lifesaver for some of them, right? They're able to create, they're able to do projects. So I like sharing the resources like Hacking STEM so that teachers can give more direction. So it's not just, oh, I created something with something, but there's now a purpose. So I think that that purpose piece is helping teachers immensely, and parents too.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And then in terms of the assistive technologist role right now, do you have a classroom that you're supporting, or is it a system, more of in a system role? It's
a system role.
So how does that look like for you as you enter is it your 4th week?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. So there have been some challenges. I think one of the biggest challenges has been supporting the teachers. A lot of teachers didn't have tech skills coming in and have had to learn very, very quickly. We were new to Microsoft Teams, and just trying to convince teachers to use Teams has been a bit of a challenge. So supporting teachers, I've reached out through Teams and said, hey, do you see me? And they're like, oh yeah. So we're troubleshooting through Teams. Awesome. And then they're learning the skills of what Teams has to offer, and then they're building their capacity instead of me sending a million emails.
It's pretty amazing to learn by doing. I think the professional colleague to colleague interactions leading to hopefully successful outcomes in school or at home today.
There's so many challenges. I mean, just logging into a device that a child or a student has never logged into from home. How do they access the board website? How do they access all their content? And then it's like, well, where is it?
Right. Yes, we're having many of those conversations on the daily. I hear you. So it sounds like the approach. There's definitely alignment in terms of the approach. The flexibility, it seems in some spaces that at times the content and continuing on where learning was, just flipping it to remote and not necessarily being mindful of just giving the opportunities, like you're saying, that it can be a low tech activity that can be a great outcome in remote learning. Without a
one of the other challenges we're finding is that parents don't have the technology skills either. And parents aren't necessarily getting the support that they need.
And so as a team, are you thinking about how are you addressing that?
We haven't yet. We don't have a plan. So if anybody has any great ideas on how to support parents, and it's simple things like they now have a board device at home, but they don't know how to connect the Wi-Fi. So their instant answer is, well, the device doesn't work.
Right.
They haven't understood that they have to connect to the Wi-Fi first. So
yes, and it's that it's tech skills. It's It's the necessity of tech skills. Well, what we'll do is we'll take it back. I know Karen Truans is on this call too from our friends at Microsoft, and we've been on some phone calls even yesterday, thinking about different ways to support. But as we consider the different ways that programming might be offered within PL and other districts, obviously. We'll keep it in mind, and as we do this, know that again we'll be able to be booked. But as we think about ways that we can support the parents with the simplest things, but sometimes it's just how do we connect with them so that they know you're there, and then that can help. Well, thanks for sharing. It's great to see you.
All good.
Yeah. But being voluntold, thanks for contributing to the conversation.